Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
To Paranormal Review Radio. I'm Anthony Agati, broadcasting from the Big Apple, New York City, and my co-host Lucy Liefried is broadcasting from the windy city of Chicago. Say hello, Lucy.
Hello, Anthony. Hello, everyone. We are so glad that you joined us. Now, you do know that we have a phone number for you to call in to join the conversation. That number is 661-244-9831. We hope you'll call us and add your input to the show. Now, if you're shy, there is a chat room. Let us know what you're thinking. We love hearing from you.
Thanks, Lucy. You know, we as paranormal investigators have one mission and goal, to search for the dead. But tonight, Lucy and I are going to investigate and review something that can never die. We're going to talk about vampires who have come to frighten and intrigue us for hundreds of years. We're going to attempt to discover the origins of the most infamous character of all time, as well as dispel some of the myths and legends that surround vampires and even Dracula. The vampire world is not just something of old-time Britain folklore or 17th century storytellers. Vampires work among us today and even light up the movie screens and the eyes of young teenage girls with the Twilight Saga. We'll explore all about the phenomenon around the Team Jacob and Team whatever, as well as the real vampires and vampire clan movements of today. I have to admit something, Lucy. When I started out doing my research on tonight's topic, I was not at all interested. I know this topic is something that you love, Lucy, but I've never understood the whole vampire fascination. But when I began reading about vampirism and its history, and even the truth behind Dracula, I have to say that it was sort of fun. I will never get into the whole Twilight thing, sorry, just not into the teen heartthrob crap. But the origins and legends were interesting to learn. So why don't we begin tonight's show with a history lesson in vampires and its first inception to the world?
Okay. I'm going to drop a bomb on everyone right now, so brace yourself. Vampires are not real and are only a product of mythology and folklore stories that have circulated around the world in many different cultures and in many different forms for hundreds of years. Sorry, I had to do that so everyone understands the truth behind these blood-sucking creatures. With that said, tales of supernatural beings that consume blood or flesh from the living cannot be pinpointed to one specific place or time period. The fact is that vampires have been around for so long that the term vampire didn't even exist when the first stories were recorded. The concept of craving blood somehow became synonymous with strength and longevity in as early as before biblical times in ancient Egypt and Babylonia time periods. Ancient Egyptians believed in, and I know I'm going to say this wrong, Sekhmet, who was considered to be the warrior goddess that drank blood. And Babylonians believed in the 7 deadly spirits that wreaked havoc on the living, including devouring the flesh and drinking blood of humans till the veins were dry. It's amazing how a 5,000-year-old story has lived until today. Funny how the story just hasn't died, just as the vampire itself doesn't die. Now, even though vampires are notorious to have been widely spread throughout Eastern and Western Europe, many other regions of the world have recorded stories of this evil character. I'm going to review with you now some of the other cultures around the world and their beliefs in vampires. Let's start with the Betsilio people of Madagascar. They tell of the Ramanga, an outlaw or a living vampire who drinks the blood and eats the nail clippings of the wealthy. Ew.
Ew.
The Malaysian Pengalan is said either to be an old or young woman who could fly around at night and hunt for the blood of pregnant women. Ancient Greek and Roman mythology believed in three spirits: Empuse, the Lamia, and the Striges. Empuse feasted on the blood of men to transform herself into a young beauty. What's wrong with that? The Lamia and the Strigs preyed on young children and young men for their hunger for blood. The dark goddess of India, Kali, was also known to be thirsty for the blood of humans. Now, wait a minute. Did you catch all that? Did you hear a trend in what I mentioned? Seems that the ancient belief of vampires mostly contained female blood-sucking entities. Why is that? Well, no one really knows. But in modern times, the vampire underworld is full of inequities as it is above ground. Female vampires in literature and movies just have not been accepted, since vampires are considered to be strong, sexual, charismatic creatures, and women are still not on the same level in the media. But there were famous female vampires in history. You bet your booty there was. The first recorded female to be categorized as a vampire was Elizabeth Bathory. Now, Elizabeth was born in 1560 to a very noble and wealthy family. She married her husband, Count Ferenc Nasdad, at the age of 15. He later died while fighting in battle to protect Hungary. Now, his death set off Elizabeth in a direction of evil and psychotic behavior. After her maid accidentally pulled her hair while combing it, Elizabeth slapped her maid so hard she drew blood. Elizabeth seemed to believe at this point that her maid's young blood was good for her skin, and that it actually made her look and feel younger. Sick, right? Well, that's not all she did. She made her henchmen gather and bring to her castle young women so that she could drain them of blood and actually bathe in their blood in her quest to capture her youth. As many as 600 women were captured, tortured, and drained of blood over a 10-year period around 1610. Elizabeth's reign of terror was stopped around this time, and she was tried, convicted, and sent to solitary confinement in her home. In 1614, she was found dead, and at the age of 54, of unknown causes, she was buried in a Hungarian cemetery. Hungary, for many years, forbid the country to speak of her name and kept her record sealed for over a century. Now, some historians speculate that there was even an earlier record of a female vampire. Oddly enough, this female vampire is found in the Bible. Yes, I said the Bible. Hebrew text in the Old Testament spoke of a woman named Lilith that was formed from the dust and earth, just as Adam was, and she was created as a wife for Adam before Eve was even created. Lilith became a little bit too bossy for Adam, and he sent her on her way to live on her own. God then created Eve from his rib, thus creating what we know now as the first couple God created. But Lilith, she wasn't a happy woman because of this, and she began to feed upon the children that Adam and Eve bore. She would come to feed off all children born, and in essence, some say she was the first female vampire. Now, I don't know about the validity of this story, but I just had to share it with you and let you make up your own opinion. Anthony, can you share with our listeners some of the most recent infamous vampires that arose in the last few hundred years?
Sure, Lucy. Well, first, let me tell you about the word vampire and how it came to be associated with those bloodsuckers. It actually came to the English language in 1732 from an English translation of a highly publicized German report of vampire killings in Serbia.
Wait, Anthony, I thought the word vampire came from the Old Slavic term oper or opier?
Yeah, you're right. And the term is also said to originate from the French word vampire that developed from the German word opier.
Well, I also have it originating from the old pagan worshiping called upire.
Lucy, we can actually go back and forth on the origin of the word vampire, but as in a lot of ancient historical mythology, it's all a culmination of many different cultures and interpretations mixed together to what we have today in the English language. I want to introduce a man named Arnold Powell, who lived in the 1700s. He was a Serbian peasant who would become the first man to be accused of being a real-life vampire. And funny enough, he never did anything to be accused of being a vampire while alive. It was only when he died that the Eastern European town in Serbia created the vampire epidemic and blamed him for many deaths, even as a corpse. The story goes like this. Arnold Powell fell off a hay truck, broke his neck, and died. The end, right? That's what you would think. After the town buried him, immediately people began telling stories of Arnold coming out at night and stalking the women and attacking them. In the weeks after his death, there were 17 bloody bodies found along the streets in his town and caused the people to believe that it was Arnold coming back to life and killing. Although the Serbian people believed this, we can probably say that the cause of these deaths were that of a plague or E. coli epidemic. The Serbian government was so convinced it was Arnold, they exhumed his body, and that is when the fears of the village were confirmed. Serbian belief at the time regarding the dead was that a corpse would sort of quickly dry out into a skeleton upon death. As we know today, this isn't true because it takes a long period of time before the body turns to skeleton. Even after 3 months, a body can still look as though it's still freshly alive. Well, the Serbians had never witnessed a dead body until this point in time. So when Arnold's body was exhumed, they saw a pretty well-preserved body with long fingernails, rosy-colored skin, and blood dripping from his mouth, which is basically all signs of decomposition in today's world. They were horrified at this sight and decided to lunge a stake through his heart to make sure Arnold would not rise again. And as they did, they heard a groaning noise come from Arnold. Again, this is part of the decomposition as the body fills with natural gases and the release of this gas once the stake is penetrated into the body, creating a foul and groaning noise. The story of Arnold Powell spread all across Eastern Europe, and people began to tell stories and rumors of other people as vampires when deaths could not be explained, thus creating the vampire rumor and folklore we know today. Do you want to know how vampires became known as sexual beings as well as blood-sucking sadists? It's actually a funny story, and also can be said born from Arnold Powell's incident. When they exhumed the body of Arnold and many other men who were accused of being vampires, there was one particular area on the body that stood out, literally. As I said before, when a body is in decomposition, it fills all cavities with gases and bloats. Well, when a man dies, his thing is filled with these gases and causes a post-mortem erection. People of the Serbian time and throughout the 1700s, they believed that this was a sign that vampires were not only killing, but also sexually attacking women at night. I mean, poor Arnold. He dies a horrible death and is known today as a blood-sucking, perverted man.
Anthony, I do believe this is when the first female mortician started working right after that incident in Serbia, correct?
Well, moving on, Lucy. Later on in the late 1800s, a man named Bram Stoker is born. Now this is going to get interesting. Bram Stoker was born in Clontarf near Dublin, Ireland on November 8, 1847. Bram, whose real name is Abraham Stoker, is recognized as one of the most prominent Gothic authors of the Victorian era. He was an accomplished athlete, journalist, author, biographer, theater critic, and a theater manager. Stoker is best known for his Gothic masterpiece Dracula, which was done in 1897. Like his immortal creation, Count Dracula, Stoker's life is shrouded in mystery, from his rumored participation in occult circles to his purported death from syphilis. Stoker was educated at Trinity College, where he won honors in science, mathematics, oratory, history, and composition. After graduating, he entered the Irish Civil Service, where he served as an inspector of petty sessions. In 1876, Stoker met the actor Henry Irving, and by 1878, he had moved to London, where he was acting manager at the famous Lyceum Theatre. It was there that Stoker entered into fashionable circles through which we learn much of his characteristics and influences. In the same year, Stoker married Florence Balcombe. Now, there has been much speculation about Stoker's family dynamic, some of which suggests that the marriage was actually loveless. The Stoker's only child, Noel, was born in 1879. Stoker's interest in the supernatural and the occult, which would become a salient focus for his later fiction, may have been rooted in his unidentified childhood illness, which supposedly kept him bedridden until the age of 7. This seclusion would be compounded by an interest in Irish folklore, which often concerned tales of bogies and vampires. In fact, Stoker's later interest included Egyptology, Babylonian lore, astral projections, and alchemy. And he was rumored to be a member of the infamous Order of the Golden Dawn, an esoteric circle of magicians attended by W.B. Yeats and Lester Crowley. Stoker published his stories since 1872, including The Crystal Cup. He had his first horror tale, which was The Chain of Destiny. He had also a collection of children's stories that were entitled Under the Sunset, and his first novel, The Snake's Past, which was in 1890. But he did not realize fame until the overwhelming success of Dracula in 1897. The responses in popular periodicals were broad, but generally positive. One 1897 review in the Athenaeum even states that Stoker goes one better than others in the supernatural field. He began the novel in 1890 and was influenced by his visit to Whitby, where he discovered in William Wilkinson's An Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia a reference to the historical Dracula. He also researched Eastern European folklore and geography in travel guides, the most well-known source being Emily Gerard's The Land Beyond the Forest. The reasons for Dracula's success are many, and has become a major focus for stage, musical, and cinematic adaptations, and more recently has become a more focus of academic criticism. Stoker continued to write Gothic and fantasy fiction, including The Lair of the White Worm, which would eventually be made into an occult film. And in 1907, he also entered the debate over censorship with essays The Censorship of Fiction and The Censorship of Stage Plays, which were published in the 19th century. Dracula's Guest, an excised chapter from Dracula, was published after his death in 1914. But after being ill since 1907, Stoker died on Saturday evening, April 20th, 1912. His death, although often attributed to syphilis, was actually likely due to a stroke. Dracula is considered to be the father of all vampire literature and has been debated to be the inspiration from a 15th century warrior, Vlad Dracul, or Vlad the Impaler as we know him, who impaled his enemies on stakes. Dracula set the ground rules for all vampire stories for the next 100 years. It was a very controversial piece of literature for its time in the Victorian era. Tales of sexually prowess women and vampires were not something that was widely mentioned during this time, but because of that, launched the popularity of vampires and sparked an increased interest in the occult till today.
That's right, Anthony. But this is where we come to my most favorite part of the discussion. Modern-day vampires and its popularity. Now, if you'll allow me, I will begin. Anthony, please, you got to bear with me for just a minute. Let's start with the obvious. Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn. Every female over the age of 12 knows these titles. The Twilight Saga is a series of 4 books that have been written by Stephanie Meyer. Yes, I have read all 4 books more than once. They were first published in 2005, and this series of books started a love affair with vampires that has not been seen since Anne Rice did it with her series of vampire novels back in the 70s. Now, these books have been made into a series of of movies, and the latest one did open this weekend. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it yet, and it is the first one that I didn't see opening weekend. Twilight is the story of a family of vampires that live in the cool, cloudy climate of Forks, Washington. The main character is Edward Cullen, who is one of the, quote, sons in a coven of vampires, which have taken on the appearance of a normal family. Now, Bella is a human girl who moves to Forks, and to quote the movie, vampire meets girl, vampire wants to eat girl, vampire falls in love with girl, Vampire saves girl's life, same old, same old. It is basically a love story following the relationship between Edward and Bella and the werewolf tribe of Native Americans who tolerate the existence of the vampires near the reservation that they live on. Now, this story hits home on the romance front, but there is one thing that Miss Meyer wrote in her own vision of what vampires are that die-hard vampire lovers took notice of. Now, they loudly complained when the books first came out. Vampires sparkle in the world of Twilight. When they're seen in the sunlight before they burn, their skin sparkles. Now, much has been said on the Internet in regards to this, from complaints to parodies to odes of adoration. Anthony, stop rolling your eyes. This is important to vampire purists.
How do you see me?
Twilight's vampires do have the characteristics that we all know vampires have. They're pretty. Now, as Edward says in the movie, I am the perfect killing machine. Everything about me is geared to draw you in. The Cullens are nice vampires. They don't kill humans, but they choose to feed off animals in the wild. Now, there are lines in the movie that every Twilight fan knows by heart. Lines like, you don't know how long I've waited for you, or you're like my own personal brand of heroin. And these lines make it such a great love story. The vampires in the story have been romanticized to the point where you almost forget that the origin of vampire is not so nice. Now, this is the very reason that the story is so popular. Well, anyway, the Cullens are not the first vampires to make a major media presence. Now, Anthony, you mentioned Bram Stoker, who started this love affair with his story. But since then, there have been countless numbers of books written on the subject of vampires. So let's start with why vampire makes such an excellent subject. Vampires have a sexiness that makes them different from other unnatural beings. The fact that they have the ability to draw their victims in so easily opens up so much room for authors to write. The helplessness the victim feels, the attraction, the need, the conquest. Sorry about that. Speaking of sexy vampires, I do have to start with the real queen of the vampire story. Interview with the Vampire was a book written by Anne Rice back in 1976. Now, the story introduces a vampire named Lestat de Lioncourt. Lestat is an old vampire who had a companion that he created named Louis. Well, Louis got tired of being a vampire after 200 years, and he agrees to give an interview to a human reporter. He shares his story, and in the process, he shares a lot of vampire secrets. Now, the reporter is listening to him, and at the end, he begs Louis to make him a vampire. Louis ends up feeding on him, and he vanishes. Now, this story goes into much detail about the vampire characteristics, the feedings, the relationships, and then Miss Rice's version of the history of the species. The vampire in this series, they were passionate, they were feeling, they were hedonistic, cruel, caring, and ultimately probably the most fascinating characters that I've ever read. This book was the first of 9 books in the series. Started from 1973 to 2003. The series was called The Vampire Chronicles. Now, 2 of that series have been made into movies, and there are 9 books. Interview with the Vampire, that was in 76, The Vampire Lestat, 1985, Queen of the Damned, which was made into a movie in 1988, Tale of the Body Thief, 1992, Memnoch the Devil, 1995, The Vampire Armand in 1998, Merrick in 2000, Black and Gold, 2001, Blackwood Farm, 2002, finally ending with Blood Canticle in 2003. Now, the main series character, Lestat, he appears in all these books. These books follow him from his creation among his life, among the present, and different periods of time in history. He does become a rock star. He has both male and female companions. He even becomes the companion of the first vampire, Akasha, in Queen of the Damned. Now, the books branch out into the many stories of so many different vampires, and each one of these vampires are different from each other, and they're each just as fascinating. Now, Anne later wrote more vampire stories after the Chronicles that were called New Tales of the Vampires, and there's 2 books. One of them was Pandora in 1998, and the other one was Vittorio the Vampire. That was in 1999. Now, both books were written in the same style, bordering on the erotic, and even wrote some books that intertwined the vampires with witches. And yes, I've read every single one of these books too, several times. Now, I had mentioned these two authors because they made a massive impact on the way vampires were portrayed in the media. They're not the only two authors who have taken on the subject. The literary vampire first appeared in 18th century poetry before becoming one of the stock fixtures of Gothic fiction with the publication of Polidori's The Vampire in 1819. Now, that was inspired by the life and legend of Lord Byron. Now, later, some influential works include the penny dreadful Varney the Vampire in 1847, Sheridan Le Fanu's Tale of Lesbian Vampire Camarilla in 1872, and, of course, the master of the genre, Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897. Now, Stoker's Dracula has been the definitive description of the vampire in popular fiction for the last century. Its portrayal of vampirism as a disease, which was a contagious demonic possession, with its undertones of sex, blood, death, it struck a chord in Victorian Britain where tuberculosis and syphilis were common. Now, vampire science fiction was covered in I Am Legend by author Richard Matheson in 1954. This novel set in future Los Angeles, and it's overrun with undead, cannibalistic, blood-sucking beings. The 1981 novel The Hunger, which was made into a film in 1983, continued the theme of open sexuality and examined the biology of vampires, suggesting that their special abilities were the result of physical properties of their blood. Now, the novel suggested that not all vampires were undead humans, but some were a separate species that evolved alongside humans. This interpretation of vampires has since been used in several science fiction movies, stories dealing with vampires, most famously in the Blade movie series. Let the Right One In, or Let Me In. This is a 2004 vampire fiction novel by Swedish writer John, I'm hoping I'm going to say this right, I can't say it. His last name is Lindquist. Now, the story centers on the relationship between a 12-year-old boy, Oscar, and a centuries-old vampire child. It's an excellent book, but it made an even better movie. Now, vampires didn't just exist in literature. Many of vampires in literature have been portrayed in TV and movies, and they've given us some of the most entertaining and loved vampires ever. Now, The Vampire in 1913 was the earliest vampire film. Nosferatu, made in 1922. Now, this was an unlicensed version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was based so closely on the novel that the estate of Bram Stoker sued and won. So all copies had to be destroyed. In 1994, it was painstakingly restored by a team of European scholars from 5 surviving prints that had escaped destruction. Nosferatu is the first film to feature a vampire's death by sunlight, which formerly only weakened vampires. Now, the next classic treatment of the vampire legend was in Universal's Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula. 5 years after the release of this film, Universal released Dracula's Daughter, a direct sequel that starts immediately after the first film. Now, a second sequel, Son of Dracula, starring Lon Chaney Jr., followed in 1943. Despite his apparent death in the 1931 film, the Count returned to life in 3 more Universal films in the 1940s. There was 1944's House of Frankenstein, 1945's House of Dracula, 1948 Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Dracula was reincarnated for a whole new generation in the celebrated Hammer horror series of films that starred Christopher Lee as the Count. The first of these films were Dracula in 1958, and it was followed by 7 sequels. Lee returned as Dracula in all but 2 of these. Of course, we already mentioned the absurd Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That was in 1948. But the vampire film has often been the subject of comedy. The Fearless Vampire Killers, made in 1967, was a notable parody of the genre. Now, other comedic treatments of variable quality include Old Dracula, made in 1974. That featured David Niven as a lovelorn Dracula. Love at First Bite in 1979, featuring George Hamilton, and one of my favorites, Dracula Dead and Loving It in 1995 with Leslie Nielsen. Now, another development in some vampire films has been a change from the supernatural horror to science fiction explanations. The Last Man on Earth, made in 1964, The Omega Man, 1971, are both based on I Am Legend. Vampirism was explained as a kind of virus in David Cronenberg's Rabid in 1976, Red-Blooded American Girl in 1990, and Daybreakers in 2009. Awesome, awesome movie. Race has been another theme, as exemplified by the black exploitation film Blackula in 1972, and several sequels. Now, since the time of Bela Lugosi's Dracula in 1931, the vampire, male or female, has usually been portrayed as an alluring sex symbol. There's a very small subgenre pioneered in Nosferatu, in which the vampire is depicted as the hideous creature of the European folklore. Max Schreck's disturbing portrayal of this role in Nosferatu was copied by Klaus Kinski in a remake of Nosferatu, Phantom der Nacht, in 1979, and in Shadow of the Vampire in 2000, Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck himself. And Dafoe's character is the ugly, disgusting creature of the original Nosferatu. Now, the main tradition, however, has been to portray the vampire in terms of a predatory sexuality. Christopher Lee, Frank Langella, Gerard Butler, Robert Patterson, Gary Oldman, these are just a few examples of the actors who have brought great sex appeal into the portrayal of the vampire. Now, the sexual themes of vampire film have become pushed to the limit in some films. There was Gayracula and The Vampire of Budapest. These were two pornographic all-male vampire movies. And Lust for Dracula, which was a pornographic all-lesbian adaptation of Bram Stoker's classic.
I think I have that.
Vampires in 1974 became even more explicit in their depiction of sex, nudity, and violence. A major character in the vampire films, though, is the vampire slayer. Now, Bram Stoker's Abraham Van Helsing is the prototype. Now, however, killing vampires has changed, where Van Helsing relied on a stake through the heart. In Vampires in 1998, directed by John Carpenter, Jack Crow has a heavily armed squad of vampire hunters. And in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the attached slayer, Buffy, summons a network of watchers and mystically endowed her with superhuman powers. Now, the list of vampire movies is endless, and I have the list, which I'm not going to read. But, Anthony, can I pick out a few of the notable ones?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first one on my list, 30 Days of Night. Now, this is a 2007 American horror film based on a comic book miniseries. This story focuses on an Alaskan town beset by vampires as it enters a 30-day-long period of polar night. This is a cold, creepy, and awesome movie. From Dusk Till Dawn is a 1996 horror film directed by Robert Rodriguez, and it's written by Quentin Tarantino. This is an awesome movie. The Addiction is an unconventional 1995 vampire film, and it stars Christopher Walken. Martin in 1977 is George Romero, and he does for vampires what he already did for zombies. It's an intense and realistic treatment that follows the exploits of Martin, who claims to be 84 years old, but he drinks human blood. Near Dark, made in 1987. This is one of the best vampire movies ever. A young cowboy is seduced by a new girl in town, only to find out he's been kissed by a vampire. Now, slowly turning into a creature of the night, he is persuaded to join up with the girl and a roaming band of ghouls. But when his own father and sister become targets in the vampire's endless search for food, He's forced to choose between his loyalty to vampires or his loyalty to his own family. Now, this one's directed by Catherine Bigelow, who recently just, I believe she directed the, it won an Oscar. It was the, about the guys in the Middle East that were defusing bombs. But awesome movie. Of course, we have Bram Stoker's Dracula, the remake in 1992 that was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, stars Gary Oldman. I cannot stop watching that movie. I watch it over and over. Then you've got Fright Night from 1985 with Charlie Brewster. He believes his next door Jerry Dandridge is a vampire, and he enlists the help of Peter Vincent, the vampire killer from TV. This one is just a whole bunch of fun. It's being remade right now with Colin Farrell in the Jerry Dandridge role, so we'll see. Interview with the Vampire, made in 1994, from the books that I was talking about before with Anne Rice. This is Neil Jordan's telling of the Anne Rice novel. I was not happy with it. Sting should have been Lestat, not Tom Cruise. These two movies, okay, Night Watch, made in 2004, and then Day Watch in 2006. These are Russian vampire movies. The director, Timur Bekmambetov. These are two brilliant movies. They're set in contemporary Moscow. They revolve around the conflict and balance between the forces of light and dark. They are really creepy, awesome movies. The Lost Boys in 1987, directed by Joel Schumacher. It was a really silly movie, but it has a really good soundtrack. Blade, 1998, is the story of a semi-human African-American superhero who battles the evil, blood-sucking vampires. Blade himself is a half vampire, but he's devoted his life to killing vampires with the help of Whistler, a human vampire hunter. His nemesis is Frost, and the guy, I can't remember the name of the guy who plays Frost, but one of the best vampires ever on film. Just awesome. There's Blade 2 in 2002. You love the first one so much, they made another. Underworld from 2003. Now, this is the fight between lichens and vampires in the most amazing wardrobe ever seen on film. Innocent Blood in 1992. Now, John Landis directed this one about a female vampires and gangsters. This is a really good movie. Of course, you've got Van Helsing in 2004. Love the vampire in this movie. Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 1992. Now, the best line of this whole movie is, great, my secret weapon is PMS. That's just terrific. Thanks for telling me. Also in this movie, Pee Wee Herman plays a vampire. Never looked better. Dracula 2000. Gerard Butler as Dracula. Really works. Vampire in Brooklyn, made in 1995. Now, this is Eddie Murphy as a vampire, and it's also directed by Wes Craven. It's a fun, good movie. Finally, one of the last vampire movies that I really loved was Cirque du Freak, The Vampire's Assistant. Now, this was in a 2009 American film adaptation of the Vampire Trilogy book series, The Saga of Darren Shan, by author Darren Shan. This movie is just awesome. Now, this is just a small list of the many vampire films. Anthony, do you have a favorite?
I mean, like I said before, I really was not really interested or have never been interested in vampires or vampire literature, books or television or even movies. But the one that I saw was Interview with a Vampire, and I kind of liked it. I mean, I know you said Tom Cruise, they should have replaced Tom Cruise with Sting, but I don't know. I kind of like that movie. It was really more dramatic, and I love the little girl in that movie. I don't remember her name, but
Claudia.
Yeah. So that was my favorite movie.
Okay, that's cool. Can I talk about television for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. I have to mention my favorite vampire television show of all time, True Blood. Now, True Blood is an American television series created and produced by Alan Ball. I believe he did 6 Feet Under. Now, this is based on the Southern Vampire Mysteries. It's a series of novels by Charlaine Harris, and it details the coexistence of vampires and humans in Bon Temps, a fictional small town in the state of Louisiana. The series centers around the adventures of Suki Stackhouse, who is a telepathic waitress. Now, this show has storylines that have my vampires, but it also has witches, fairies, shapeshifters, and ghosts. It really is the best vampire show I've ever seen. It has amazing opening sequence that I watch every single time, and it also has the best theme song that I think ever. It's called Bad Things by Jace Everett. Now, there are a few more shows, and I'm sure all of you have seen one or more of them. You had Blood Ties in 2006, Sanctuary, which started in 2008, Angel, of course, the spinoff from Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 1999, of course, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which started in 1997, Being Human, the British version, and also now that there's an American version, Moonlight, 2007. Vampire Diaries, which is currently on now, which started in 2009. The granddaddy of them all, Dark Shadows. This was back in 1996, and it actually was a soap opera, and it was just so cool. I mean, people who would never, ever get caught dead admitting that they watched a soap opera admitted that they watched Dark Shadows. Ultraviolet, that was a British series featuring vampires. That was in 1998. Back in 1992, there was Forever Night. 2005 gave us Supernatural. 2006, Blood Ties. And, of course, how could we forget Blade, the series, which was in 2006. Anthony, I could go on, and this could take days. So I'd like to move on. Now, did you know that vampires are featured in quite a few video games?
I'm sure there are. I mean, they're everywhere, but I'm not a gamer, so I don't know anything about the video games and vampires. Why don't you enlighten us?
Okay, well, I am a gamer, okay? So I do have a list of video games that feature vampires. They either use Dracula or Dracula-inspired characters. Of course, we've got to start with the Elder Scrolls. This game series involves vampires created by a demon lord. They all have the typical tributes, but some, though not all of them, can walk in the sunlight if they've fed on a victim. This is my favorite RPG to non-gamers role-playing games. I have played this game 3 times. I've literally devoted a year of my life to this game. Blood Rain. Now, this is a 2002 third-person action-adventure video game, and it was the first game in the Blood Rain series. Now, in addition to a sequel, Blood Rain 2, Blood Rain has inspired a whole series of films and self-contained comic books. It was strongly influenced by a previous game that was out called Nocturne. Now, Mortal Kombat series, there are a species of vampire. There's a role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade. There's another game called Darkstalkers. And there's another one called Shadowrun, which feature vampires whose existence is explained by a resurgence of the human vampiric virus. There's a comedy game called Conker's Bad Fur Day. It has a Dracula-like vampire who is often insulted by Conker. And, of course, you've got the classic video game series Castlevania. It kind of gives you a new origin for Dracula, and it chronicles the never-ending struggle between him and the Belmont clan of vampire hunters, and it stretches from the 11th century all the way to the 21st century. There's a video game series called Shadow Hearts, and it's got 4 vampires in there. Now, the Castlevania has influenced other games. There's one called Masquerade. The Castlevania series is the longest-running video game series that uses Dracula legend. There's been several Buffy the Vampire Slayer video games. Now, going from video games, vampires, of course, have been in comic books and in graphic novels. In 1969, you have Vampirella. 1972, Tomb of Dracula. Blade, 1973. 30 Days of Night in 2002. Now, this is where the movie came from. Same thing with Blade. There is Dracula versus King Arthur in 2005. In addition, many of major superheroes in comic books or graphic novels have faced vampire supervillains at one point. Many of the comic books featuring Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel have been released. In fact, there's even an 8th season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Japanese anime and manga, they feature vampires in several titles. There's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Vampire Princess Miyu, Nightwalker, the Midnight Detective. This one, Vampire Hunter D, one of my favorites, and Blood, the Last Vampire. This is awesome. If you've never seen this, you've got to see this one. There's Hellsing in 2002, Vampire Host in 2004, let's see, Bleach 2005, Blood 2005, Trinity Blood 2005, Vampire Knight, Karen, and Black Blood Brothers. Wow, I've been going on and on and on. I'm so sorry. Anthony, what about vampires now? I know they're out there. Can you tell me a story?
Yeah, I know they're out there, and I'm hoping that they are out there and that they call in. Let me give out the phone number for callers to give us a call and, share some of your stories or some of your favorite movies or anything that you want to talk about vampires. We'd love to hear from you. The number is 661-244-9831. So just give us a call and chat. I mean, we're not experts on vampires and the vampirism. Well, Lucy is actually an expert on gaming, I can see here. But before I talk about real vampires, actually, Lucy, I just want to add to your list of movies. Just one movie. There is a movie that is actually in the works right now from 20th Century Fox by author Seth Grahame-Smith, and it's titled, get ready for this one, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. What? On top of that, it's supposed to be in 3D. Is that not funny? I mean, and it's supposed to be actually released in the summer of 2012. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. What is going on?
And people make fun of my Twilight movies. What? No.
Well, that's in another category in its own. Okay, I have actually several stories to share about real vampires, some more strange than the one before. I'm sure everyone out there has seen the ghost hunting show Paranormal State. If you haven't, check it out. It's on A&E. But I'm not a particularly huge fan of this show. It's great and it's good. I think it's a little bit dramatic at points. But then again, what ghost hunting or paranormal investigative show isn't dramatic at certain points? But I'm sure there are people out there that do like this. But there is a psychic on that show, and her name is Michelle Belanger. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. But she's a rather odd woman on the show, somewhat dramatic, I guess you could say. I always felt that there was something more to her because she wasn't like other psychics I've encountered or saw on television. And while doing my research, I actually came across a news video from Ohio. And in this news video, I guess it was some sort of local news reporter in Ohio, and they interviewed her, and the actual news segment was talking about vampires and real-life vampires that were walking among us today. And Michelle actually claims to be a psychic vampire. I want to play the news interview and let you listen to Michelle explaining the world of real vampires, and she actually also talks about her own personal life as a psychic vampire. So take a listen to this.
From folklore to fiction, haunting historical figures to Hollywood's fanged fascination.
I am Dracula.
For centuries, vampire tales have terrorized and tantalized mortals.
The vampire in fiction is an immortal, undead, blood-sucking individual who stalks the night.
Northeast Ohio author and National Merit Scholar Michelle Belanger studies vampires and the fledgling fantasy.
some elegant, svelte kind of person who will, come through the French doors and romance you. He's the quintessential demon lover.
But that's fiction, right? Michelle says no, that there's an actively growing vampire subculture.
Folks who call themselves real vampires run on a continuum. There are those who drink blood. There are those who really just adopt the vampire as a fashion archetype.
According to the Atlanta Vampire Alliance, or AVA, there are thousands of people all around the world who consider themselves real vampires, from Amsterdam to London to right here in Cleveland. But they say they aren't out trolling around cemeteries at all hours of the night, and they aren't satanic in sacrificing small animals. They say they're just regular people, your friends, family, even coworkers.
There are different types of vampires.
The first group are lifestylers, draped in black. Some lifestylers will permanently transform their teeth into fangs.
The vampire chic.
The next group is also the most controversial, sanguine vampires, or sangs. They feed on real human blood.
Blood is something that they can see and touch and taste, and therefore it's real.
Entire websites are dedicated to finding blood donors. This site discusses drinking animal blood, but many sangs feel that only human blood is best.
What you are getting is the energy out of the blood.
Mal is a sanguine vampire that we spoke with by phone to protect his identity. His awakening began as a teenager.
My energy patterns were not where they should be, especially compared to other people.
He needed energy, and caffeine wasn't cutting it.
I did have blood cravings. The first person I fed on sanguine, I was about 18.
Mal began regularly and cautiously feeding.
I cannot stress enough how potentially dangerous it is to sang feed off of someone. Get tested, make sure your donor gets tested.
Done properly, Mal says his health dramatically improved.
Think of blood as like electricity. Blood is a better conduit for that energy than just trying to pull it through the air.
But some vampires say they can draw energy from the air.
Vampires like me, who are psychic vampires.
Michelle was a sickly child who underwent 2 open-heart surgeries. She had experimented with meditative energy exercises and absorbing energy from classmates and crowds.
The fact of the matter is we all interact with one another on this energetic level. It's breath, life, energy, laying on of hands of light techniques, or Reiki, any of the energy healing techniques, it functions on the exact same principles. The only difference is instead of putting energy in, you're taking it out.
It worked. Until
I just kind of went through this period where I'm like, nobody's going to take any of my academic work seriously if I persist with this.
Then one day, she collapsed.
They actually asked me if I would be willing to be put on a heart transplant list. And in my world, the third time is not a charm.
Immediately, Michelle called a friend for a feeding.
And the next day, I was back to lifting weights. I was fine.
Michelle says psychic vampires are all around us, whether they know it or not.
Very aggressive, dominant people who get up into your space, and by the time they're done with their confrontational behavior, you feel drained.
Both vampires say they would never feed on someone against their will. They don't melt in the sun, wooden spikes are for tents, and garlic's a great spice, but nothing more.
I think the word vampire is a stumbling block for a lot of people. I know that by the fact that I call myself a psychic vampire, the extreme skeptics are going to go, well, sure. But don't take my word for it. Go out and find an experience and judge for yourself.
Suzanne Stratford, Fox 8 News.
I knew there was actually something different about her. She's a very strange woman, but I mean it does tell it does tell the tale of real life vampires and the sort of vampire clan movement of today. Lucy, have you ever noticed anybody walking around sort of that what she was describing or what they were describing as the vampire lifestylist? You know, the black long coats or the black clothing and the dark eyes. Have you ever noticed any of that walking around in Chicago?
You pretty much described my wardrobe and my makeup. You know what? There's so many people that are like goth and you know, like from back in the 80s, and there's some of us that have never, ever let go. So, I mean, yeah, you see these people, but honestly, you know, they don't. I've never.
Yeah, I mean, is there a difference between goth and vampire lifestylists? I mean, to me, it's almost pretty much the same. No.
No. Goth is dark, depressing, and miserable. The vampire one, pure lifestyle, it just seems to be a little bit more. How do I say this nicely? Off the wall, weird. I mean, and especially in today's culture, it's downright dangerous. I mean, for someone to actually say, I feel the need to feed on someone else's blood. Well, with so many things that are floating around medically, it's not exactly a smart choice. I mean, wouldn't you think?
I mean, I would think so. I mean, they talked about this website where you can go to get the blood online. I mean, that's so dangerous that I mean, it's just calling for it. Just reeks of disease and just I don't know. There's so many issues with even the dating online and the Craigslist, and then they have those online ads about hookups and meetups. I mean, that's one thing, and this is actually taking it one step further. I mean, you're literally drinking the blood of someone that you don't even know that could possibly have something. I mean, I warn anybody, if you're out there, that's great and you're doing it, but take extra precaution if you're going to do that. I mean, that is something sick. And I don't know, do you think that that's sort of something mental? I mean, Michelle was talking about how she was complete when she had stopped drinking blood because of, I guess, the issue with her heart from her donors, that she became drained and lethargic and tired and just real low. And, she called up a friend donor and boom, that was it. She just got back to life again. I mean, is that mental? I mean, how can blood do that, number one? And number two, it's sort of like, a drug dealer. I mean, there's got to be something psychological going on with that whole aspect of it.
Well, Anthony, okay, when you were talking about it just really struck me. In True Blood, okay, people drink the blood of the vampires. It's kind of like a drug thing. They get high on it. It's kind of like an underground drug thing, and this is in the world of Bontemps. But think about it for real, okay? What's the difference between a blood transfusion, intravenously, and actually just taking it right from the source? And then if you think about some of these other cultures, like there's some tribes like in Africa, I know I've seen it on TV once before, where they'll actually cut I don't know if it was a steer or a goat, and the tribesmen would drink the blood, and it doesn't seem to hurt them. But then again, it's like, sure, to me, it just seems like, yeah, maybe you could say it's like a blood transfusion, but I do not think anything, and I can't even stress this enough, protects you from the dangers that are there with blood-borne pathogens. There are so many things that can happen to you from doing this practice. It's just mind-boggling to me that anyone would take that chance. So, like you said, if you're going to do something like this, I really think you need to educate yourself first. Take a look at what the potential risks are, because it's just, just for a thrill. I don't know if it's a thrill thing. I don't know if it's an actual physical thing, but it's not worth it when you look at the risks in the long run. Sure, I mean, get a hickey, whatever, suck on somebody's neck, that's cool. But to take it to that level where you're literally endangering yourself, I think that just something that people need to think about.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. I mean, to each their own, and folks out there can sort of, and people do whatever they want. They have these little cliques and these little habits that folks do, but you really do have to take precaution in that. I don't know. I'm just not in that realm, and I don't mean to offend anyone by saying what I've been saying. It's just that in my mind, I can't fathom doing that at all. You know, I have a hard time drinking certain drinks, let alone blood. But I want to get on with some more information that I actually was able to catch, and it's some information on infamous murderers that actually have lived in this century. You know, between 1900 and 2000, actually even sooner than that. Even as late as just this year, there was a report on something related to vampire. And the audio clip that I'm going to play for you now actually contains information, and it was a documentary. I could not find where it aired or if it ever aired. I don't know if this is just something that was put on the internet, but it was actually a pretty interesting clip, and it talked about the most recent mass murderers who claimed to be either affected by vampires or were vampires themselves. It's a pretty revealing clip that includes mentions of some infamous murderers like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and the Son of Sam killer. These folks in some way actually were either directed by or there was some sort of influence of vampires, or actually believed that they were. So take a listen to this. It's actually a pretty interesting clip.
In the 1920s, the city of Hanover, Germany was terrorized by the Hanover vampire. His name was Fritz Harman, and his early adolescence had been tainted with accusations of molesting children. After a brief stint in the army, Harman opened a butcher shop and settled into society as a good citizen. He became a police buff and informant, helping Hanover detectives with tips about the city's petty criminals. The nearby Hanover train station was crowded with homeless boys and young men in transit from job to job. Harman used his association with the police to roam the train station late at night and pick up young boys. He lured them along with the promise of a warm bed and food. Once in his home, Harman would use his large body to pin the boy down and suddenly sink his teeth into the boy's throat in a fatal bite. Harman would usually dismember the body and store the parts throughout his house. But perhaps the most horrifying detail of this case is what Harman did with the body parts. To the shock of his customers, Harman had ground up the body parts and made them into sausages, which he ate himself and also sold to his customers. By official count, Harman's deadly bite claimed 24 victims, although some thought it might be higher. There have been other vampire-like murderers, such as Englishman John Hay. Hay was executed for the murder of 9 people in the 1940s. Hay claimed to be motivated by the sole desire to drink his victims' blood. He would lure them into a storeroom where he worked, then bash them over the head or shoot them. He would plug up the wounds to halt the loss of blood, and then delicately slice open an artery in the neck. He would catch the blood in a cup and drink it until he felt refreshed. Many of these vampires have been labeled clinical vampires because of the sexual pleasure most derived from seeing or drinking blood. Of course, their blood fetishes have been taken to the extreme of mass murder, but there are some vampires who will go to this extreme. In our own country, mass murderers Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, Richard Trenton Chase, and Jeffrey Dahmer all had vampire connections. Bundy bit his victims and said he felt like a vampire. Son of Sam Berkowitz claimed he had been poisoned by blood-sucking demons that compelled him to kill. Chase, dubbed the vampire killer by the press, drank the blood of at least one of the 6 victims, thinking it would cleanse him. And Dahmer ate the flesh and drank the blood of some of his victims. And there were other lesser-known cases. In 1981, James Riva was sentenced to life imprisonment in Massachusetts for shooting his grandmother and drinking her blood from the bullet holes, insisting all the while he was a vampire. In 1982, Jerry Moore killed his girlfriend in Chicago and drank her blood to gain strength. And in 1989, 3 boys killed a vagrant in Minnesota, licking the blood off their hands as they beat him. One of the boys cited the vampire film The Lost Boys as his inspiration. Of course, none of these murderers are nowadays spoken of as vampires, not in any serious sense anyway. People describe them as disturbed, mentally or sociopathic. People tend to regard them as a modern phenomenon, byproducts of our unnatural, stress-skewed society. But are they vampires? Perhaps.
I just thought that was an interesting clip, and actually the host sounds pretty much like a vampire himself. I mean, but it was interesting to learn that, and I guess I knew, about the stories, and I've heard about it and read about it in the newspapers about, Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, but I never, I guess, put two and two together and came up with that conclusion. I mean, I've never heard of them claiming to be vampires or any of them to have any sort of influence from the vampire history and the vampire stories, but I thought it was interesting to actually it clicked in me when I was reading it that, they go hand in hand, and they claim to be vampires, and that's the reasons for their killings. I just thought it was pretty cool to learn about that, and that was something new for me. Excuse me. Sorry, go ahead, Lucy.
You know what? I do remember the one that he mentioned in Chicago, Jerry Moore drinking his girlfriend's blood. I remember that one when it happened. But in defense of vampires, and I know they're not real, and I know that, this section we're pointing out the I think the vampire connection seems to be, I think the media has, pinned that association on these people. I think, unfortunately, and I really think that these are just some really misguided, something is not right with them and the things that they've done. The kids beating up on the vagrant and licking the blood because they've seen the Lost Boys. Things like that happen, and it happened. I'm sure there are people that are influenced by media and things like that, but I think it just seems like that the news and the outlets, to sensationalize what's happened, put the vampire tag on it, because honestly I don't remember when Jeffrey Dahmer, when that all went down. Because that was here in Chicago, and it was horrifying. But I think if I remember correctly, I don't think there ever was mention of a vampire connection back then. Of course, I was an infant when all this happened, but I don't remember that. But see, the other guy drinking his girlfriend's blood, that one, yes, I remember that there was something like that. But I honestly think that in this case, it might be the media. The media is just trying to sensationalize the story, and they're pinning that tag on them.
Well, I didn't actually go into looking at any police records or anything further into, Bundy or Dahmer or any of them, so I can't validate whether or not they themselves have claimed it. But, if they have claimed it and that's what's on record, that they either were influenced or felt like that they were a vampire, then I don't think it is media sensationalizing it all and sort of creating this aura that, it's a vampire, they were vampires, and that's what, caused them to do what they did. So I can't validate whether it is or it isn't. And I don't, again, like you said, I don't remember ever hearing about that when I heard the news coming out and about Dahmer and Bundy and, reading any of the news articles. I never actually heard it or read it. It never sort of festered in me to remember any of that. So I can't validate it, but maybe it's this guy's sort of interpretation of it, and he's putting his own words or his own opinions into the fact. But I actually want to get into something actually much more recent. You guys maybe remember this story. It actually just happened this past September. And I'm going to read the news article. There have been video and stuff like that, but here's the actual news article. And I actually read the police record. And pretty much everything that's in this article here is in the police record. And it's kind of it really is a strange incident in regards to this whole topic tonight about vampires. So here's the news article, and it's from Florida, and it's describing the incident. A woman was arrested Thursday after she claimed to be a vampire and bit chunks out of the face and arms of a homeless man. She was found by police half naked and covered in blood. She said she had no memory of the attack. The attack happened just after midnight Thursday morning outside an abandoned Hooters restaurant in St. Petersburg, Florida. A 69-year-old homeless man, Milton Ellis, was sleeping when a 22-year-old Josephine Smith straddled him and whispered into his ear, "I am a vampire and I'm going to eat you," according to information on the arrest affidavit. I mean, that actually sounds like a line from a movie. Smith then proceeded to bite a piece. Well, oh yeah, that could be it. Let me go check my stash. Smith then proceeded to bite a piece of skin off from Ellis's arm. Then she went for his face and lips. Horrified, Ellis somehow managed to break free and escape. Later, when Ellis described the experience, he said getting away felt like he was breaking, quote-unquote, free from her trance. He fled to a nearby gas station and called 911. His lip wounds were severe enough to require stitches. But Ellis knew the woman. They met a few hours earlier at a shopping market behind the abandoned Hooters. He had invited Smith to stay with him under the overhang at the abandoned restaurant. I guess it was raining out, may have been some sort of weather relation. That's why he asked her to stay under the overhang with him. Allegedly, Smith was waiting for a relative from Pensacola to come get her. He was staying near an overhang near the vacant Hooters restaurant, so he thought it might be a good place for her to stay, said Mike Puetz of the St. Petersburg Police Department. Smith later told authorities that she had no recollection of the attack. She could provide no explanation as to why she was found undressed and smeared with blood. She has been charged with felony and aggravated battery on an elderly person. She is currently detained at the Pinellas County Jail on $50,000 bail. Well, this is actually taken from an article that was written in September, so I'm sure, and I couldn't find any information. I'm sure she's either been convicted or maybe her trial is coming up. I'm not sure about the current facts of the case, but can you imagine? First of all, what is this guy doing by a Hooters restaurant? A 69-year-old man over by Hooters restaurant in the back. I mean, you couldn't find any other place? You go to Hooters?
Also, too, it's like you're talking about a homeless guy, and he's inviting some 22-year-old girl to go hang out under, an overhang. First off, there's got to be something wrong there, because why is she out there? So I wonder, was there like drugs involved? Was there alcohol involved? I mean, it just does not sound like your normal situation. So, and the fact that she doesn't remember anything, she could have been on a bad trip. She could have been, sounds like some kind of altered chemical substance involved here.
Oh yeah, it could have been. I mean, but I've gotten drunk before. I've never gone off and said that I'm a vampire. I don't know. There's some strange folks out there, and somehow this one is tied to the whole vampire lore and folklore of the time as we are right here, right now. Lucy, do you want to add anything else before we sort of conclude the night? I mean, I don't have any callers, so we can probably cut the show a little shorter, but I just wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to add anything before we sort of conclude for the night.
Well, you know what? I mean, all in all, like you said, I do love the subject. I've had a love affair with vampires since I've picked up the first Anne Rice book. It started way back then. And the whole Twilight thing, I know it's like a little, mostly teenagers are involved with it, but you know what? There's a lot of more mature women who are actually into it. And the whole thing is it's a romance. It's a love story. So the whole vampire thing, sure, it's attached to it. And like I said before, I'm a vampire purist. I don't agree with the sparkly skin,
But you know what? Growing up and watching all those vampire movies, and there's just something about vampires that just really, they're fascinating. All of the books that I've read, all of the movies, I mean, there's just so many, and then as more and more they come out. And then going through some of the films, I mean, when you see some of the people that have actually played vampire, I mean, there was a movie, and I didn't put it on my list, but Nicolas Cage even played a vampire. I mean, it's endless. I mean, there's so many. So I think the fascination and love affair with vampires, I think it's something that's here to stay. I think it involves a lot of people. And, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got these poor, misguided people that obviously there's something wrong. And, you know, when that switch goes off in their head and something negative goes to where they're doing it, you know, it could be influenced, but it could have been anything else that influenced them. Why do serial killers, you know, get influenced from something else? It just so happens that these people pick the vampires. As far as the vampire culture, you know, like you said before, to each his own, and we're not here to down anybody. I mean, I'm basically giving my opinion. I don't understand it. I love wearing black, but it's just something that I don't understand. Now, psychic vampire, I kind of in a way I can agree with it, because I do feel that there are people that just somehow, when you're around them, they just drain your energy. But I don't think I've ever associated the term psychic vampire with them, but I think it does make sense. So all in all, I think vampires, I think they're cool. You know, I love reading about them. I love watching movies about them. And, you know, I've spent more than my share of time playing video games that have vampires to do as a subject. So for me, personally, this topic was fun. I enjoyed going through all of this, reliving my love affair with vampires, watching film clips and stuff like that. You know, I don't know. It's a big, big thing. Twilight has just, you know, hit so many people, and it's such a moneymaker. So there's got to be a reason. I think the fascination with vampires isn't just a few people. I think it's major. I think it's widespread. That's just my opinion on it, and like I said, it's just me. So I don't know, Anthony.
Well, you are a big lover of vampires, and I know this is one of your favorite topics to talk about. So I'm actually going to put you on the spot. You don't know this, but I want to ask you a question. It's sort of personal to you in regards to your feelings about vampires. In history, vampires were, I guess, for a brief amount of time. And it's very weird that they were only this way a brief amount of time. Vampires were considered ugly and horrific and evil. I mean, you know, they just had no charisma about them at all. And then it jumped to being the sort of sexually charismatic and sleek-looking and, you know, hunky whatever. Which do you prefer? Do you love the way that the trend is going now, like with the Twilight Saga, of the portrayal of vampires? Do you find that it sort of depicts vampires in a better way as they are depicted in Twilight, or do you sort of tend to gear towards more of the, you know, the Nosferatu feel and look of that horrific, horrible, ugly, grotesque, evil-looking type? Which one do you sort of favor the most?
Well, honestly, the most obvious choice would be the charismatic, you know, sexually attractive vampire. But you know what? I do have a special place in my heart for the original monster, because basically that's what vampires were. Vampires were monsters. They were the Nosferatu. They were ugly. They were horrible. But you know what? The explanation, which has come across in a lot of the novels and a lot of the things that I've read, it's all part of the supernatural being's ability to attract. I mean, if you look in nature, there's predators, and they have markings that makes them look like a simple bush, or there's actually flowers, like the Venus flytrap looks like a gorgeous flower, but actually when a fly comes near it, boom, it's gonna eat it. So in a way, I'm equalizing the sexiness and how they look as part of that predatory way of getting the victims. It's that supernatural power that they have, that they can draw things in. Now, I will say personally, I don't care for like the Buffy, the Vampire Slayer genre. I really don't get into like Vampire Diaries. I mean, you're talking about now that gets, to me, it got a little soapy. I still prefer your good old-fashioned, like I said, True Blood. I like it because it's got the vampires, but it's got everything. Like I said, it's got fairies, it's got shapeshifters. So it's like a supernatural playground. In my head, yes, vampires are supernatural beings. I do have a special fondness for that first ugly vampire, because that's where it all started. I mean, vampires are monsters, and no matter how cute and sparkly they are, you still have to remember the ultimate goal of a vampire is to drink your blood. So basically, whether they're cute and sparkly or if they're ugly and crone-like, it's still, if you look at it in a realistic way, they are monsters, But that doesn't change the fact that I adore them and I love them and I'm fascinated by them, and I will read any vampire book you throw in front of me, and probably have already. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how other people feel about it, but that's personally how I feel.
Where do you see? I mean, it seems as though that there's been this long history and this long trend of this sexual, charismatic, quote unquote, vampire that have been written in books and recently been in movies and in television. Do you see that? Do you see this charismatic vampire continuing on, or do you think it's going to sort of change into some sort of other sort of characteristic or personality that attracts people at the time? I mean, I think right now, paranormal is big. The idea of, or the topic of anything paranormal or supernatural is pretty big now. I mean, it wasn't 30 or 40 years ago, but I think right now in the last 15, 20 years, it's really grown. And anything that you relate to paranormal, and that includes vampires, supernatural, that it gets an audience. And so, right now, being a vampire and being in a soap opera vampire movie, it is attractive, not to me, but to teenagers and to women, older women. It is attractive. Do you see maybe it possibly changing in the future, as far as maybe the big thing? Maybe paranormal will not be this so big in the next 15, 20 years. I hope it is, but maybe it isn't. And maybe it's some sort of new age or futuristic type sort of aura or atmosphere in the world or in America. Do you think it could change, or do you think that this actual charismatic vampire, for lack of a better word, will live on and continue?
Okay. It's really interesting that you brought that up, because during the research and going through, thinking back of all the movies that I love, it's already changed. There is, I mentioned the science fiction vampire that's come across. And if you look at 30 Days of Night, the two movies that came out of Russia, I Am Legend, which was really, really an awesome movie. It's science fiction. They're science fiction based, and even Daybreakers. That was, what I think in 2009. Blade. Some of the vampire stories that are being brought to us are based more on the scientific side of it, where there's a particular virus or there's some kind of chemical imbalance. And I think as the way the world goes, as I think we get more, exposed to things like Chernobyl and the nuclear disaster in Japan, I think there's going to be this. I think the story's going to evolve. I think the story already has started evolving, but I think there's always going to be a niche for the romantic vampire. But I think that it's already started changing, and it's already started going into the science fiction side of it, which, of course, you can talk about that in anything. I mean, look at The Matrix. The Matrix opened up this whole scientific kind of like reality. Is it, take the green pill, take the blue pill? So I think vampires are no different. I think you're going to have your classic vampire, and there's always going to be an audience for that. You're always going to have the sexy vampire, where you're always going to have maybe most likely the female population that is probably geared towards that. But I think vampires have already started changing, and when you look at some of the movies and some of the literature that's come out, and actually I Am Legend was written back in 1954, but it really didn't become a movie till later on, I think the genre is changing. So I think the way the world goes and whatever we get more exposed to, I think that's going to make a difference. Now, one thing personally I really don't like, I don't like the overt, completely sexual movies that are out there, like the pornos and stuff like that. I'm sorry. You know what? It just, to me, it's insulting to the genre. I mean, it's just, if you want to go watch porn, go watch porn. That's fine. But leave my vampires alone. It just doesn't work well with me. But as far as, like the romance, sure, I love a good romance, so that's there. But I've also, like I said, some of these science fiction movies, they are so good. Like I said, you got to watch Daybreakers. If you're a vampire fan, it's a new way of thinking about it, and it's explained as a virus, but it doesn't change everything. Even True Blood, the whole basis of everything is True Blood is a synthetic blood that the vampires use to drink. Oh my God, I'm talking about this stuff like it's real. I mean, it's just so fascinating to me. I mean, I could just go forever on this. So,
well, I can agree with you, Lucy, but I can also disagree with you a little bit on that. I think the concept or the storyline of whatever it is, if it's a book or if it's a movie or if it's a television show, I think the concept and the storyline can actually be changed and become either sort of quote-unquote soap opera-like, or can be scientific, or can be completely supernatural. But I think the main character, which is the vampire or the vampiress, I think will always stay as a sexually charismatic hero. And I think that's what people want to see. I mean, you want to see someone who's good-looking as the main character. And, sort of the protagonist in the movie, and the antagonist is always, the ugly one and the evil one. I think it's going to be sort of, I think Hollywood is just going to create that within every movie. But the concept, the storyline may change, but the vampire will always be that sexy, good-looking man or woman, whoever it is. I think they will continue to stay that way. That's my opinion, and I sort of disagree with you on that it is changing now. I think it's just the storyline that's changing. I don't think the actual vampire, the head vampire or the lead vampire hasn't changed at all. I think they're just banking on that concept, and they're just changing the story. I don't know. That's my opinion.
I can see that.
Why don't we conclude if we have nothing else? I'm gonna just go out and basically end with a little conclusion that I created, a little ending note. However vampires came to exist, or to exist or not to exist, the stories and the phenomenon will be around for hundreds of years to come. Although I won't be around that long, it will be interesting to see what the vampire addiction morphs into and how it will be interpreted in the next generation. Maybe a robotic vampire that feeds on the circuits of your dishwasher, sort of like what we were just talking about, Lucy. I had fun reviewing tonight's topic, and Lucy, I know you did, and I know you're going to end the show, but hopefully you guys out there that are listening, you had fun too. I hope it sort of educated you and taught you something that you may have never learned or never knew before, or may have sort of sparked a debate. And, if you disagree with anything that we've said, check us out on our Facebook page at Paranormal Review Radio, and, send us a note and let us know, maybe we got something wrong, or, if you agree with us and, want to give us props or a pat on the back, send us a note that way as well. So next time you see the movie Twilight or the show True Blood, think about where it all began and what the meaning of being a vampire truly portrays. Lucy, anything you want to say as we close out tonight's show?
Yes. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I do hope you enjoyed our little discussion about vampires. Anthony, thank you again for everything you do to put this show on. I don't know. This one of my favorite subjects in the whole world. I'm always down for watching a vampire movie. Any new vampire book that you have seen or read, you know what, drop us a line because I want to read it. But I love the subject. I love vampires. Never going to stop. So on that note, I do want to say next week, okay, we're going to be back on Friday night. It's going to be November 25th, and I know you guys are going to be all tired from shopping on Black Friday. So why don't you come by, join us, join the conversation. We're going to explore the phenomena that is known as black-eyed kids. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Come on by. We'll see you then. But until then, good night.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next Friday.
Paranormal Review